Singapore is a small country, but it is connected to the rest of the world in many ways. Singaporeans travel, work, study, do business, and live in many countries. Singapore is also deeply involved in international trade, diplomacy, and regional cooperation. When the world faces big crises, Singapore and Singaporeans are affected. Singapore tries to handle these crises with calm, clear thinking and strong systems. Singaporeans try to be resilient, practical, and responsible, whether the crisis is health, geopolitical tension, economic disruption, or security threats. In this script, you will hear how Singaporeans and Singapore as a nation try to handle the toughest crises that are faced overseas, and how they deal with challenges that come from outside their borders. One of the greatest global crises in the past decade was the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic began as a local health crisis in one part of the world, but quickly became a global emergency. Singapore, like almost every other nation, faced enormous challenges. The pandemic disrupted travel, closed borders, and put lives at risk. Many Singaporeans were overseas when the pandemic began. Some were students, some were workers, and some were travelers. Many suddenly found themselves in foreign countries with borders closing, flights cancelled, and uncertainty about when they could return home. In those early months of 2020 and 2021, the world was in shock. Healthcare systems were overwhelmed, travel restrictions changed daily, and millions of people were unsure of what would happen next. Singapore's government worked hard to bring Singaporeans home safely. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Singapore's embassies and high commissions in other countries coordinated efforts to locate stranded Singaporeans and organize safe flights home. Singapore cooperated with foreign governments, airlines, and international organizations to make sure Singaporeans could come back. Many Singaporeans remember the efforts made during that time: phone calls, emails, public announcements, and coordinated evacuations. Students in Europe or Asia were contacted and guided step by step about how to return. Workers were advised on quarantine arrangements. Older Singaporeans abroad were given special care in coordination with local authorities. These efforts showed how Singapore could respond to a global health crisis that extended far beyond its borders. At the same time, Singaporean healthcare workers, scientists, and researchers worked tirelessly to manage infections and treat patients both at home and in cooperation with the global medical community. Singapore's health system, though small, became known for strong testing, tracing, and containment measures. Many nations watched Singapore's response and adapted similar techniques in their own countries. Singapore contributed to international research efforts and shared data to help others understand the virus and how to fight it. This was an example of how Singapore responded to a global crisis, by keeping its people safe abroad while also contributing to global solutions. Another type of crisis that Singapore faces involves geopolitical tension. The world's geopolitical landscape has become more complex and unstable in recent years. There are ongoing conflicts, strained international relationships, and power struggles among major countries. These tensions create uncertainty for global markets, trade routes, and the safety of citizens abroad. Singapore depends heavily on open trade, secure sea lanes, and peaceful international relations. This means any major conflict overseas can affect Singapore directly. For example, the war in Ukraine that began in 2022 has continued to affect the global economy and security environment. Singapore, though far away from Eastern Europe, felt the effects through rising energy prices, supply chain disruptions, and economic uncertainty. Singapore's leaders have spoken openly about how such conflicts can influence Singapore's stability and prosperity. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong explained that simultaneous global crises, such as the war in Ukraine, tense relations between superpowers, and the rise of protectionism in world trade, create a tough environment for Singapore's economy and society. These forces, although overseas, can influence prices of goods, cost of energy, jobs, and the security environment for Singaporeans living abroad. Singapore's response to these geopolitical tensions has been cautious and balanced. Singapore maintains strong diplomatic relations with many nations. It upholds the principles of international law and supports peaceful negotiation and dialogue. Singapore also participates in international forums and regional associations that work to reduce tensions and foster cooperation. By building bridges rather than walls, Singapore tries to create conditions where crises abroad do not escalate into direct harm for its citizens or its interests. There was a specific diplomatic and political example in 2025 that illustrated how Singapore handles foreign influence and external pressures. Singapore introduced legislation aimed at protecting race-based organizations from foreign interference. Although this law is domestic in nature, it reflects Singapore's concern about outside influence shaping internal opinions and political dynamics. The law requires transparency about foreign donations and affiliations to prevent external forces from manipulating racial harmony within Singapore. This shows how Singapore sees foreign involvement as a crisis risk, even when it is not a traditional conflict. Protecting social cohesion is part of Singapore's strategy for handling pressures and crises that have their roots overseas. Singapore also pays attention to global strategic scenarios and regional security. In 2025, international experts held simulation exercises to model how a blockade of Taiwan by a neighboring power might unfold. These exercises highlighted Singapore's strategic importance in the region and showed how other countries might rely on Singapore's infrastructure, diplomatic links, and logistical capabilities in a crisis. Such war games are not about promoting conflict, but about understanding risks and planning safe responses. Singapore participates in these discussions to be ready in the event that geopolitical tension escalates into broader regional crisis. This reflects a proactive mindset, prepare for what may come, and work with others to ensure safety when the crisis is overseas but affects many. Another kind of crisis that touches Singaporeans overseas is economic pressure. Singapore's economy relies heavily on international trade and foreign investment. When global economic downturns occur, Singapore feels the impact. In times of recession or economic slowdown, job opportunities for Singaporeans abroad can be affected. Singaporean workers overseas may find contracts ending earlier than expected, or they may struggle to find new work. Companies in Singapore that operate in multiple countries may see earnings drop when global markets shrink. To handle such economic crises, Singapore strengthens its economic policies, seeks new markets for trade, and supports citizens looking for work overseas. Singapore negotiates free trade agreements with many countries to keep markets open and reduce barriers. Cybersecurity is another area where crisis can spill over from overseas. In 2025, Singapore faced reports of serious cyberattacks targeting key infrastructure systems. These attacks were significant enough that Singapore's Ministry of Defence and cybersecurity agencies mobilized specialized units to respond. Cyber threats often originate in one country, target systems in another, and involve actors across many borders. This makes cybersecurity one of the toughest modern crises to manage. Singapore's response involves training, technology investment, and international cooperation to protect citizens, companies, and Singapore's digital infrastructure from attacks that begin outside its borders. Natural disasters and environmental crises are another category of global challenges that affect Singaporeans abroad. Although Singapore does not experience many natural disasters due to its geographic location, Singaporeans living or traveling in other countries may be at risk during earthquakes, typhoons, floods, or other extreme weather events. Singapore's government and embassies monitor these situations and provide guidance and assistance to Singaporeans. In some cases, Singapore works with foreign governments and international aid agencies to coordinate relief and evacuation when needed. Furthermore, Singapore often offers humanitarian assistance to countries affected by major disasters. For example, Singapore provided financial and logistical support to help communities in other countries recover from devastating floods. This assistance strengthens Singapore's global partnerships and reflects the idea that helping others in crisis builds goodwill and shared security. When Singaporeans face crises overseas, such as political instability, travel disruptions, or health emergencies, the Singapore government issues travel advisories and safety instructions. These advisories are meant to keep citizens informed about risks in foreign countries, so they can make safe decisions. Singapore's consular services are available 24 hours a day to assist citizens in distress. This can include lost passports, arrests abroad, medical emergencies, or urgent evacuations. Singaporeans know that if they find themselves in a difficult situation overseas, their government will try to support them. In a crisis related to global telecommunications and infrastructure, Singapore's role in international business has also come under scrutiny. Companies headquartered or partly owned by Singapore, such as major telecom providers, operate in other countries. When services fail or cause harm, as happened with significant communications outages linked to a Singapore-associated telecom company in Australia, Singapore's government and companies work with foreign regulators and governments to address problems, take responsibility, and restore trust. This reflects deeper global interdependence. Singapore cannot ignore crises that occur in other countries when its businesses play important roles there. Another way Singaporeans handle overseas crises is through educational programs, cultural exchanges, and international cooperation. Many Singaporean students study abroad and return with broader perspectives. Singapore encourages its citizens to learn about global cultures, languages, and systems. This prepares them to deal with difficult situations when they are outside Singapore. Singaporean professionals in international organizations bring knowledge back home and also represent Singapore's values on the global stage. Singapore participates actively in international organizations, including the United Nations, World Health Organization, ASEAN, and others. These platforms allow Singapore to contribute to collective responses to crises, from pandemics to climate change to economic instability. Singapore's contributions are often rooted in practical solutions, data sharing, policy coordination, and support for multilateral action. Singapore's leadership often speaks about resilience. Resilience means the ability to withstand shocks and adapt to change. Whether the crisis originates from a health emergency, a conflict overseas, an economic downturn, environmental disaster, or security threat, Singaporeans are encouraged to be resilient. They are encouraged to stay informed, prepare for change, support one another, and maintain unity in the face of adversity. Singapore's journey in handling overseas crises has not been easy, but it has shown that even a small nation can play a meaningful role in the global community. Singapore's emphasis on good governance, strong institutions, international cooperation, and clear communication helps it manage crises that go beyond its borders. In conclusion, Singaporeans and Singapore as a nation try to handle the toughest crises faced overseas through careful planning, international collaboration, proactive diplomacy, strong security measures, and resilient social and economic systems. Singapore does not act alone, it works with partners around the world. Singaporeans learn from global events and apply lessons to protect their citizens and contribute positively to the global response. The world will continue to face complex challenges, and Singapore will continue to strive to protect its people, support global stability, and respond to crises with composure and cooperation.